Okay, we're here to talk about this lens right here. I don't know how to hold this up in a way that's cinematic. No, focus on it. Focus, yes. Buttery. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, sorry, I bumped the mic. So this is the lens we shot Ghosts of Gold Creek on. The whole thing was shot on this one lens, and that is because I am poor and I could only afford to buy one. It was actually one of the decisions we had to think about in pre-production, whether we wanted to use this lens or we wanted to use the set of Mikey lenses that we had. The Mikey cinema lenses are great. I love them. But this one has some unique advantages. The disadvantage is we only have one, so you got one focal length we're going to be working with for the entire short film, which is it's still very doable. A lot of movies have been shot on just one focal length, so this is not a new thing by any means, but it can limit you in a few ways. Let's talk about why this lens is what we decided to go with. First off, this is an anamorphic lens from BLAZAR. It is from their Remus line, and when it came out, I was in absolute shock. So the budget anamorphic lens world had been evolving for quite some time, but they all had their issues. They all had something that was just an absolute deal breaker. So BLAZAR had a line before this one called the Great Joy anamorphic lenses, and their 50mm of that I was seriously considering buying, but it had one major flaw. It had squeeze factor breathing. So it was a 1.8 times squeeze factor, but through the focal distance, the squeeze factor would change. So yes, you could manually keyframe the squeeze factor in post, but that sucks because you would have to kind of do it by eye, and you kind of just have to guess how deep you're focusing, and it wasn't something I really wanted to have to deal with. So I didn't pick up the Great Joys. Then this one came out, and it answered so many questions that people had about budget anamorphics. Could they get down lower than like T2.9? This says yes. This goes down to T2, which is a good amount shallower than 2.9. Can a budget anamorphic have barrel distortion? Pretty much every single budget anamorphic lens before this had pincushion distortion. So one of the main draws of the anamorphic look is its distortion, but pincushion distortion is buns. Pincushion distortion takes these sides right here and squishes them in, same with like the top part, so it kind of squeezes your face. Barrel distortion does the opposite. Barrel distortion distorts out, and it's a much more desirable look. So you can correct for both of these in post, but not that I don't want to, I like the look of barrel distortion. It's a part of what adds the anamorphic look. And I didn't want pincushion distortion. The reason you get a sick lens is for its sick characteristics. And if you're creating all the sick characteristics in post, are you even using a sick lens at that point? So this hits a little bit of a happy medium with the squeeze factor. It's 1.5. Original anamorphics are 2 times squeeze. So your vertical focal length will be whatever the focal length of the lens is, but then your horizontal focal length, or your horizontal field of view, is going to be 2 times the equivalent, or divided by 2 the equivalent. Basically, if you're shooting on a 50mm lens with a 2 times squeeze factor, your horizontal field of view is going to be 25mm. So you're going to get 50mm this way, but you're going to get 25 this way. That's why they just feel wider, because they're squishing all this extra data onto this sensor, and then when you de-squeeze it, you just get that feeling of extra. So it stays 50mm in the look, but you're getting extra wide on the horizontal. That's the widescreen look. That is, there's just something magical, and that's one of the main components of why people love the anamorphic look. There's the oval bokeh. People love the oval bokeh. There's just the field of view. You get the much wider field of view that you can just see more of the scene, and it feels less claustrophobic while still getting tight shots. Like, you'll have a tight shot, a close-up, but you'll still be getting all of this room to work with. I love it. So this one's 1.5. So if you would be shooting at 100mm, let's say, you're going to get a 100mm field of view vertically, but then horizontally, you're going to get So 100 divided by 1.5, you're going to be getting a 66.6 millimeter equivalent. So at this 45 millimeter lens, the horizontal field of view will be the equivalent of a 30 millimeter lens. So did this lens do what I thought it was going to do, what I wanted it to do for that short film? The answer is yes, absolutely. Let me talk about the drawbacks of it first. It can be a little bit soft. It sharpens up when you get past 2.8, so I wouldn't recommend shooting it all the way open at T2, even though we did a few times in the short film. I would shoot it closed down a little bit. It sharpens it up. But I already go through and I track things in post for narrative. I'll track faces, I'll track important elements just to get the color right on those important elements to make sure they stand out. So all I did in post here was add a little bit of sharpening to those masks that I was already doing. The other drawback to this lens and anamorphics in general is going to be your minimum focusing distance. So that's a stat about lenses people don't normally talk about. Macro lenses, obviously you can get really close to your subject and keep it in focus, but a lot of lenses you're going to be looking at a couple feet of minimum focusing distance. With anamorphics, all anamorphics, but yes, this one, the minimum focusing distance is kind of buns. So your close-up shots, you're not gonna be able to get very close. So how are you gonna do those? Simple fix diopters or close-up filters. You can get little filters that you screw onto the front or screw onto your matte box that change your focusing. They add a little bit of distortion to your image, but again, I'm not opposed to distortion. I think it looks cool without overdoing it, obviously. But yeah, so then we can get our close-up shots too. So those are the drawbacks that I have with this lens, but both of those can be easily overcome with very little extra money or effort. So now, the look on this thing, let's talk about it. This lens is beautiful. I love it. I'm not sure if they are still selling the blue flare, which is what this is. This one has the blue flare. They came out with amber, blue, and I think they came out with silver too. Silver means there's no coating on it at all. The flare will just take the color of whatever is causing it. Amber looks pretty good for like daylight shoots. All the flares will be this like orangish streak, but blue's the way to go. And I promise, hear me out. I know you might think it's weird, but it's what people are used to. It's what's cinematic in my opinion. The amber flare feels like a trendy TikTok thing in my opinion. Old anamorphic lenses, vintage anamorphics, have blue flares. They always have. I can't say that for completely certain, but I know that they often did, and that's the look people are familiar with. It still looks good outdoor in the sunlight, and it works really well indoors. I know people often attribute blue flares to like sci-fi type stuff, but this was a Western, and tell me that this image doesn't look amazing. The oval bokeh, you just got to put it out there. It's cool. People like it. People rock with it. All right, but that's not the main thing that I love about this lens. The main thing I love is the field of view and the distortion. It was perfect for this project because we wanted wide landscape shots, right? So it's like, okay, we have to shoot this whole thing on 45 millimeters. How are we gonna get those wide landscape shots? Well, it's got a 1.5 times crop factor. We're actually getting way wider horizontally. What do you need for wide landscapes? Wider horizontally. We don't need more of the sky. We want more of the landscape, and we got that with this lens. Plus 45 millimeters, that's still good for like close-up type stuff. It gave such good separation and distortion that it almost felt like a cheat code to making this look like a movie. In my opinion, this kind of took it to the next level, making it feel like a step above something just shot on spherical. And now, do I think that this short film would have been garbage if we chose the Mikeys instead of this? Absolutely not. I think it would have been just as good, and I think a lot of people would not have been able to tell the difference. But I can't deny that there's something really special about the anamorphic look that just, for whatever reason, it just feels like cinema. And I think that people are so used to lenses being like clinically perfect and sharp everywhere that movies are kind of starting to look like that. They're kind of starting to look clinical and sharp and perfect, and the lighting is always perfectly exposed, and there's no contrast or nothing's in the foreground. It's just kind of bland in my opinion. And I think you're starting to see kind of a resurgence of people realizing this and remembering that, you know, all those imperfections in vintage lenses, those were kind of boss. Like I kind of rocked with those. So let's start using those again. So I do think there's increased interest in that. So is the look of anamorphic only cool because of nostalgia and because we had to use these lenses for a time? I mean, originally anamorphics were used to squish the image over here so that they could put the audio here. So that's the only reason they were invented. But now the look has become synonymous with cinema. So is that the only reason? It's probably the biggest reason, honestly. Like, do you think people would care at all about anamorphics if it wasn't a look we were familiar with and loved? Maybe not. Maybe not. But it is. That's the world we live in, and I rock with it. So I'm going to keep using this bad boy for narrative projects, and I'm going to keep using things that aren't perfect for as long as I can. So that's it. I'm done.